terms of the overarching challenges of estimating the allowance, I'm assuming many of you on the call are involved in the allowance process in one nature or another, and you probably know a lot of these challenges. Over the last couple of years, this process has become more and more time intensive. It is very manual in ways as far as pulling everything together. You can pull together data from your loan system, potentially multiple loan systems or multiple sources, and pull that together. And oftentimes that's done in Excel spreadsheets, and perhaps multiple Excel spreadsheets with multiple people at the bank that are working on these different Excel spreadsheets, passing them back and forth. And there can be a lot of issues with version control or appropriate controls on these spreadsheets, and oftentimes they can be very difficult to interpret other than to the creator, and presents a fairly challenging situation sometimes, especially if people change roles or leave the bank, to make sure that the process is transferable. And and it's not necessarily an easy environment for everyone to work in the same spreadsheets and so on without and maintaining all the appropriate changes. So that and the more complex the process has become, the more of an issue that can become has become. But it's been the reality of the situation, and that's where people have traditionally done their ALLL. And so it just becomes important when you're using that, obviously, to watch that closely and have a good, well-defined process and consistent process. Other challenges, of course, are just around the shifting landscape of the allowance. There are continually new demands being placed upon banks around this new accounting standards, which mentioned the new FASB guidelines that have been in discussions really the last couple of years since the advent of the financial crisis, especially been some push to look at things in a different way. And so there's certainly accounting standards, shifting demands from from regulators, and then certainly the challenge of balancing the pressures that you have from different constituencies. Obviously, the allowance is a very important number when it comes to the financial statement, as there's a big effect on income one way or the other, depending on your allowance and your provision. And so obviously you have different viewpoints of the various people that you need to present the allowance to. The examiners, their interest is primarily making sure you have adequate reserves, and certainly going to be more conservative on that aspect, as and whereas your external auditors are primarily concerned with following GAAP to the T, regardless of whether it's the most conservative measure or not necessarily, and then your board and other members are concerned with whatever effects that the allowance may have on income. So certainly those different viewpoints, as can give different priorities in terms of how people approach looking at what you present to them with regards to the allowance. In addition, over the last couple of years, that's made the process even more time-consuming, as there have been additional reporting and disclosure requirements for all banks. As of last year, financial statements ending the period 2011 under the ASU 2010-20 accounting standards update, all banks, including privately held banks, have to prepare sets of disclosure reports that are based on information primarily related to the allowance. And so that those can be somewhat of a challenge to pull all that information together. So these are just some of the challenges certainly that we hear and that I hear in working with banks. In the last couple of years now, I've worked with over 100 banks of varying sizes, ranging anywhere from smaller, community banks smaller than $50 million in assets up to some in the 15 to 20 billion range as well. So seen a variety of different things, and these seem to be some of the common sets of challenges. And certainly the amount of time that's being spent on the allowance has multiplied in the last couple of years as some of these various requirements have grown.